Okay, so want to talk about balance Druid. I started doing stuff with my Druid after several expansions of not doing anything with her. I feel like I want to say I dusted off my Druid because it's been about that long. When I started doing stuff with her, she still had her Legion invasion gear on from when I was trying to level her a bit, as many people did during the invasions. I think the last time I did anything with her, I was trying to think back. I want to say was Mop, um, and I don't even remember for sure what I would have been doing. Probably leveling farm stuff. Um, so I played around with Guardian a bit, since Guardian's really good right now in PvP, and just kind of got wore out with that a little bit. And then went to Feral because I wanted to do more stealth. Uh, just do more stealth in PvP. And then I switched over to Balance to basically just go in and CC people. And Balance and Resto is kind of what I played when I played her originally. This was the first character I actually got to a max level. So I had played her quite a bit back in the day, and that kind of is what I settled back into this time. Kind of been going back and forth between Balance and Resto. Um, just finished the uh, Burning Crusade time walking, so I did the 5 dungeons, got my piece of gear, I've done a little bit of PvP. So this is going to be more of a refresher. If you haven't played Druid in a while, or maybe you haven't played Druid at all, kind of going to go over the rotation, the talents, what I think is good for PvP, PvE, um, and just kind of a comparison between what I remember and what it is now. So, as I said, kind of a refresher. So, if we look through the spell book first, most of your Druid abilities are going to be there. Nothing much has changed there. When you switch over to balance, again, not really anything I don't remember. Um, there's some talents that are new. Uh, Sunbeam, everything like that. I remember getting eventually when you got your abilities by leveling up. Um, I do seem to remember things like Typhoon and Cyclone were, I think, specific to the spec you were in, or they were like a talent choice or something. I don't remember having to have both of them at the same time. Because I remember getting Typhoon, and it had a knockback, which it still does, and I remember doing like Scarlet Monastery with this, and getting yelled at by the tank for using it because it had a knockback. I don't remember having Cyclone though, or I never used it. One of the two. Didn't PvP all that much when I first started. Mostly did dungeons and things like that. Um, so yeah, pretty much everything you'd still expect. Not too much has changed. So as far as the rotation goes, so back in the day, um, Eclipse worked a little bit different than it does now. So you used to have a bar that would go from a lunar eclipse to a solar eclipse, and then depending on which spell you used, I want to say if you used the opposite, um, if you use the opposite ability. If you used a nature ability, it would get you a lunar eclipse. If you used a arcane ability, it would get you a solar eclipse, something like that. Um, and now it kind of does the same thing, but it is built into a passive. So it still alternates like it did before. So every time you use either 2 Starfires or 2 Wraths, it starts an Eclipse, which is basically a 15-second buff that will, for Wrath, reduce cast time and increase damage done. For Starfire, will reduce cast time and increase critical strike. So once you kind of figure this out, everything else is fairly simple. Um, it's pretty straightforward. This is just kind of the whole thing. It's a little bit like Elemental Shaman if you've played that back in the day where you had Molten Earth and all of that. It was the passives were the important thing. So this is definitely a spec that relies on the passive. So you can't just go through and just start hitting buttons. Once I figured this out, I actually did fairly decent DPS in some of the time walking dungeons I did. Don't know that I'd figured all that out or was all that familiar with everything when I was trying to do PvP, so I'm not going to use that as much of a benchmark. Um, yeah, so Mastery was total Eclipse. Solar Eclipse increases nature damage done. Lunar Eclipse increases arcane damage done. Um, don't honestly remember what it was back in the day. I know you had. I remember Wrath. I remember Moonfire. I don't remember Sunfire. Or Moonfire turned into Sunfire, it seems like. I seem to remember. I don't remember Star Surge other than it being like a level 85 talent when we had those. And I barely remember Starfall. I want to say this was a talent. I don't remember Starfire at all. There was a it was a nature like swarm of insects or swarm or something like that that would was kind of your other dot alongside Moonfire that would do nature damage, where you'd get a swarm of insects that would attack your target. Everyone used that for everything, as I remember back in the day, or at least what little bit of PvP and stuff I did. I remember that was like the go-to ability you saw all the time. Um, so what you have to do is, as I said, so if you use 2 Starfire in a row, then it'll cause you to have a solar eclipse. And then once that has passed, the first 2 Wraths you use will start a solar eclipse. And then you can just kind of go back and forth. You can't trigger one or the other. It does have to alternate. But if you're spamming one or the other, you should alternate between the two anyway. Wrath wasn't always the best ability back in the day, as I remember. So you didn't always want to use it. It was kind of a filler spell, is what I remember using it for. So other than that, that's like the biggest part of it. If you can figure that out, which is fairly simple. Once I actually found Eclipse, I was looking at the Mastery for some reason, and the Mastery wasn't helping. And then I couldn't figure out why it kept alternating. Because again, I didn't have the little bar. They took the bar away a long time ago and then started Astral Power. Or Lunar Power. No, Astral Power. Yeah, Astral Power. So then once I was going through it, I was reading the passives and then found Eclipse. I was like, oh, okay, that makes far more sense. I was just horribly confusing myself with the procs. I knew I knew enough, remembered enough that Arcane went on the left and Nature was on the right. So I'd had everything set up correctly, but outside of that, I was just lost, just horribly confusing myself. So outside of that, you can use both dots, Moonfire and Starfire. Starfire will does have an AOE effect, so it will apply itself to any target nearby. Uh, and then as far as like actual damage abilities that use Astral Power, you have Star Surge, which is your single target ability, and then Star Fall, which is your AoE ability. So what I had kind of figured out was keep running through your rotation, apply Starfire, and then just keep using Starfall whenever you had the Astral Power for it. Doesn't stack, does only last 8 seconds, so you can keep it up pretty much for the whole fight of mobs. As I said, it was Burning Crusade time walking last week, which can be a little trickier. Actually, didn't have that hard of a time. We did wipe on a couple of the older, I think less popular dungeons, the ones that maybe aren't as well known, that actually have mechanics you actually have to use abilities for at different times. Um, but other than that, which can be said of any group, um, we got through it actually pretty easily. I was quite surprised. I've been in some where it is just seems like you just keep slugging along one mob pack to the other. Not out of line to say some older Burning Crusade time walking uh, groups. In the right dungeon, it very easily could have taken an hour or more. So um, yeah, just kept using this whenever I had the energy or the astral power for it. And then for the boss fights, again, just kept running through the rotation. Would use Moonfire. You can go ahead and use Starfire, and then was just spamming Star Surge. And then that was pretty much it for your baseline abilities. And then I did take a couple talents. So I quasi set this up for PvP, with the exception of like the last two talents I just kind of took for fun. Um, so Nature's Balance is what, when I looked it up, this is what was recommended. You generate astral power, and your astral power depletes to 50 instead of completely. Um, Warrior of a Loon, I could see maybe being a viable alternative, kind of a second choice. Um, kind of with the 50%, kind of reminds me with how some of the talents interact with energy for like Rogue. So between generating one astral power every 2 seconds is okay. Um, Definitely not going to run out of astral power, I think is safe to say. Um, Kind of works like, if you've played Shadow Priest, kind of works along the same concept as Insanity, or a better version of what Runic Power is supposed to be for Death Knights. Although Death Knights are more melee, so you can argue that was intentional. So you have to generate, so you're not just up there kind of one-shotting everything. Um, so the 50% is definitely worth keeping in mind. Although Warrior of a Loon, before I figured out the whole Eclipse thing, I was trying to think, because Starfire, when I do remember using it here and there, was usually your bigger hitting ability. Um, and this causes your next three to be instant cast and generate 40% increased astral power. So it seemed like maybe if you used it kind of as a cooldown or something to that effect, kind of how Beast Mastery hunters can use Bestial Wrath, kind of short burst on a short cooldown, kind of like that. Force of Nature, was put in a few expansions ago, I remember. I don't know. I've never seen anyone use this. When it first came out, you saw everyone using it, and rightfully so, because it kind of works like a mirror image. Um, they taunt your enemy to the targeted area, which is not bad. However, you are a caster, so I mean, either or. Arcane and Nature are pretty good abilities usually in the game. So, Nature's Balance or Warrior of a Loon, unless you have a specific reason to take Force of Nature. If you're just leveling an alt or something and you just think it's a fun ability for questing, then by all means. Not a bad ability, I just don't know that it's the most optimal one here. Um, it's kind of one of those things where you have some better options, and then you have one that kind of pales in comparison. So it's kind of the reverse of, instead of having one good one and two kind of mediocre ones, it's kind of the reverse. You have two better ones and then one kind of so-so one. So Renew is probably, I would say, the default. A lot of people take Wild Charge depending on what other spec you play as. Doesn't really do much in Moonkin form. You just bounce backwards. So again, think of like Disengage for hunters. Um, I don't really need that. Renew is definitely more important. You can use Regrowth, however, you still have to deal with the cast time and everything. This is heals you for 30% instantly on a 1.5 minute cooldown, which is not terrible. Tiger Dash, I just never take. I've got um, Dash and Stampeding Roar, so I really have no reason to take um, another cooldown. And Tiger Dash replaces Dash. I know some people have taken this in the past if they've been running old dungeons or raids. And that's fine. I just don't find much practical use for it. Otherwise, I don't have an issue with Dash staying off cooldown. So, as I said, there were only a few occasions where, when we were doing dungeons, the group would wipe. So that's more more than enough uptime on Dash to make it worthwhile. So I don't need anything else with a shorter. I think it has a shorter cooldown, right? Yeah, yeah. I don't need anything else with shorter cooldown. So yeah, by process of elimination, Renewal is probably the better choice there. And then for your affinity, it was recommended Guardian because you get incapacitating roar. I don't know that I disagree with that. Alternatively, restoration wouldn't be terrible. Um, I have balance as my affinity for restoration, so um, you do get Ysera's gift, which heals as a passive. You do get some healing spells. Um, Usural's Vortex is another CC. Although for PvP, Guardian of the three choices is probably the better one to take, I want to say. Being a little tanky is not terrible. Because when you need it, you need it. If you're on a flag map, and I've just been doing random battlegrounds, so there's no guarantee you're going to have a tank. So if you are able to get the flag and you just need a little bit of health and damage reduction, what have you. And it was also kind of recommended or explained that if you keep, incapacitating roar, it shifts you into bear form, so it kind of helps you stay alive. So it was kind of a 2-for-1. You incapacitate the target or targets, and you end up in bear form, with more health, little tankier. So it goes from 31 to 39. So not terrible. Otherwise, I would say again, like if you were going to quest or something, feral affinities probably fine. Um, for PvP, possibly if you wanted to go back and forth between a melee and a range. People don't generally play Druid that way. They try to pick an affinity that works with whatever spec they're in. Um, so just kind of having Guardian as a, if need be, kind of emergency setup is actually kind of nice. I kind of like that the way it was explained. So, Mighty Bash just stuns targets. You could argue about what you wanted to take here. Mass Entanglement, I have seen some druids take. I don't feel like I need it. I'm not really ever, I don't need like AoE CC. I've got Entangling Root, I've got Cyclone, I've got Solar Beam, of course Mighty Bash, which is a melee ability, by the way. Um, Basically with a 10-yard range. However, it's just kind of by default. Heart of the Wild has been kind of the default and then not the default for a while now, depending, again, kind of what you're doing with your affinity. Doesn't really help me much in Guardian. It gives you additional stamina, multiple uses of Iron Fur, which may overlap, which is a very short, where is it? Very short, lasts for 7 seconds, so very short cooldown, very short duration, though. Kind of a weird damage mitigation for a tank. And Frenzied Regeneration has 2 charges, so that is your heal as a... where is it? Now I can't find it. Why am I overlooking it? There we go. Is your self-heal as a Guardian Druid. So, yeah, I mean, you could maybe in rated, if I get to the point where I do rated, if Mighty Bash just doesn't seem to be... any one of these arguably is going to be just kind of setting there as an ability. They all kind of have a specific situation to use them in. I have yet to see when Heart of the Wild first was introduced, which I want to say was around Warlords. I thought, oh, this is going to be really good. People are going to have kind of a hybrid setup with this and everything else. Kind of yes, kind of no. Again, kind of depending on what you do. I've never seen this as actually like the go-to must-have talent. And what does it do for Resto? Healing of your restoration spells increases by 30%. Your mana cost is reduced by 50 for Feral. Damage of your Feral abilities increased by 30% critical strikes with attacks that generate a combo point, generate an additional combo point. So yeah, so you really have to be using the ability to get the benefit off of that. So typically as a caster, if you're getting hit by melee attack, you're going to get some pushback. So Mighty Bash is there just as kind of a safeguard. The other thing is with Entangling Root, damage can remove the effect. And I'm very leery of abilities where damage can remove the effect, because in PvP there's a lot going on. There's a lot of AoE. I have used, and anyone who's done a fair amount of PvP will have used an ability and then had somebody else attack, and the CC just completely breaks. So, Demon Hunters with their Imprison are probably most familiar with that lately. So Mighty Bash is fine. But any one of these is kind of valid in their own way, depending on the situation and what affinity you take. This is kind of a weird thing. It's not. It's already kind of weird that Druid has 4 specs, and then they put in an affinity where you can get abilities from one of those 4. So it's a bit. It's like 2 rows of kind of situational abilities there. So then the incartation chosen of a Loon was what was recommended. So it just increases your celestial alignment. I could not figure out what it was. When you use it, it doesn't give you a buff. All it does is increase the increase the cast time of Starfire and Wrath. That's it, and I think increase your critical strike. Yeah, that is it. There was no passive that I could find called Celestial Alignment. Like I said, there's no buff. So I don't know if this was. It seemed like it was something at one point, so I don't know if it's just text they didn't change, but that's essentially what it does. Just increases the cast time of Starfire, Wrath, and your critical strike. So it's not a terrible ability to have. However, I was looking at what else might be more viable. Star-Lord seemed interesting. Star Surge and Starfall grant you 4% haste for 15 seconds. That was kind of what I was thinking because Starfire does have almost a 2-second cooldown, so it is a bit slow to use. Stacks up 3 times. Gaining a stack does not refresh the duration, which that's fine. And then Soul of the Forest, which I've taken in the past. Eclipse increases Wrath's astral power regeneration by 50%, increases Starfire's area of effect damage by 150%. So you could you could take this. I just think there's slightly better talents for what they do. The When you look up kind of guides or kind of recommended talent choices, a lot of things want you to set balance up much like an affliction warlock, where you just get your dots out and then kind of run through your rotation of what abilities you have. So yeah, incantation is probably fine. Star Lord would probably be my second choice. Um, like I said, you don't have a problem generating astral power, and the AOE effect for Starfire is not that much that you would need to take this. And it took me out of Moonkin there. Yeah, and it doesn't even show you area of effect damage by 150%, but it doesn't even show you how much that actually is to see. So, yeah, for right now, that works perfectly fine. It's good in PvP, it's good in PvE. And then, as I said, the last 2 I kind of took just for the fun of it. It was recommended from what I saw when I was looking up talents to take 2 moons, which basically allows your Moonfire to do what Sunfire does and become kind of an AoE dot. Or kind of gives it a cleave effect, I should say, because it hits another nearby target within 15 yards. I took Stellar Flare, which is basically just another dot. Again, talking about Affliction Warlock, kind of works like, I want to say Agony, where it doesn't do much initial damage, but it does a pretty good amount of AoE damage over time and generates astral power. Um, Solus was, or Soltis was what the other recommended talent. During the first 6 seconds of eclipse, shooting stars falls 105% more often. So that is your passive, which does, very small amount of damage. Moonfire and Starfire damage over time has a chance to call down a falling star. Dealing astral power and generating. It doesn't say if it's a single target ability or an AoE. Pretty sure it's a single target ability from what I can tell. Um, and that procs pretty often, so if you were really adamant about taking that, you could. I'm level 60 and it doesn't even do 1,000 damage. Um, Actually, before I got my gear swapped out, it was actually at 300 and something. So, yeah. Abilities like this, if the damage is too low, trying to proc them is kind of a detriment to your DPS in some cases. Again, I'm kind of still playing around with everything, so if it seems like this is actually worth trying to take into account, um, I've just been letting it, just letting it improve with my gear. I'm not really doing anything to support it necessarily, um, or that interacts with it, that has synergy with it. I took New Moon, which is actually a really interesting ability. So it has 3 charges, and so the first 2 will be half moons, and then the third charge will be a full moon. So it will do single target damage, and then becomes a new moon, which does pretty hefty kind of AoE burst damage. And that's more kind of what I wanted in PvP, was more something that was burst damage. Kind of thought of this like taking Ice Fury and Ice Shock for Elemental Shaman. You have your single target, kind of your AoE, and then New Moon is just kind of there. As you saw, has a pretty quick cast time the first couple times, and then a little slower with the AoE damage. So not too bad. They don't work together necessarily. Um, and I will kind of on a boss fight, I will use Stellar Flare as an AoE, and then kind of use New Moon as kind of a filler, um, depending on what it is we're doing, depending on the boss or the mob fight. You can use it for either. So these just I kind of run through the rotation, like I said, running through Eclipse using Sunfire, Starfall for AoE, and then running through Eclipse and putting out my dots, Moonfire, Starfire, and then just kind of spamming Star Surge. So kind of depends on if I mess up the rotation. I might use these just to kind of let things reset, or just use them for a little bit of extra DPS, depending on, again, kind of the boss. Um, Stellar Drift, Starfall damage, Starfall deals 50% additional damage and allows you to cast while moving while it is active, but has a 12-second cooldown. So the cooldown, I feel like, is detrimental to it, because as I said, once you run through Eclipse, you can just keep spamming Starfall, and it actually does a pretty good, is a pretty good DPS increase, from what Recount was telling me. You keep Sunfire up, which doesn't do... It does quite a bit of damage, but it doesn't seem to reflect that when you actually use it on the target. I think because it's damage over time, and I usually use it on mob fights mostly, it's not getting off the full duration, so you could kind of cut the damage in half, and then it's kind of on par with your other kind of single target abilities. Moonfire does not spread just on its own, so it's more of a single target AoE, or a single target dot. Excuse me. So the cooldown was kind of made me a little hesitant there. Stellar Flare does fine, especially on boss fights, so I have no issue with that. And these both have really unique animations. If I show you Stellar Flare, and then you've already seen New Moon. So it kind of increases there, and then yeah. Fury of a Loon is another ability. I really don't need another ability. Calls down a beam of pure celestial energy that follows the target, dealing up to X amount of astral damage over 8 seconds within its area. Damage reduced on secondary targets. So anyone in PvP, of course, has seen this. Just a blinding amount of light that follows you around. A good balanced druid will entangle roots, solar beam, and then fury of a loon. So again, I kind of wanted more bursty kind of damage. So this you can move out of if you don't do it correctly. On my monk, I can use roll or soul shape and just kind of blink out of it if I'm not CC'd otherwise. New Moon actually targets you can actually target the enemy and use this. So it has a little bit of an advantage. You're not seeing this as much as you used to. It was like a staple in PvP for a time, for quite a while. I don't know if it just came out or if it was just the best you could have. But as I said, when I looked up recommended ones, it wasn't even recommended. Soltis was the recommended one. So yeah. So and then PvP talents I'm still kind of figuring out. Owl can adapt. Frenzy can stack up 2 times and reduce the cast time of your next Cyclone or Entangling Roots. So, got those up there. That was the whole point of wanting to play balance was to CC. Cyclone is incredibly annoying in PvP. High wind, Cyclone leaves the target reeling, reducing their damage and healing by 30% for 4 seconds. So, again, kind of the synergy with Cyclone. I don't know that this would necessarily be your recommended talent, but that was kind of more my goal, was just burst damage and CC. And then Celestial Guardian. Bear form reduces magical damage taken from spells by 10%, and you may now cast Moonfire while in bear form. So you're not really generally doing damage, I find. It's more, you more have it as a survivability kind of thing. So yeah, and I think that's pretty much about it. So yeah, so there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.